The Courtroom Gambit, a teen's fight for justice. The Los Angeles County Courthouse buzzed with murmurs, a thick tension hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Judge Walter Grayson adjusted his glasses and peered down at the defendant. Well, well, Jalen Dawson, 19 years old and already making a name for yourself in my courtroom, he said, his tone dripping with amusement. Tell me, kid, do you even know how serious these charges are? Jalen, standing tall in an ill-fitting courtroom suit, didn't flinch. He had seen this look before, the quiet smugness of someone who had already decided his fate. Grand theft auto, resisting arrest, the judge continued, flipping through the case file. And let's see here. Ah, yes, fingerprints on the stolen vehicle. Looks like we have an open and shut case. A ripple of laughter moved through the spectators, the prosecutor chuckling under his breath. Jalen took a breath, slow and measured. He had been preparing for this moment his whole life, just not from this side of the courtroom. A case built on assumptions. The prosecutor, Mitchell Carrington, adjusted his tie and stood. Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. The defendant's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel of a stolen 2022 Audi A6. An officer witnessed him at the scene, and when confronted, what did he do? He ran. Jalen's mother, sitting behind him, clutched her hands together. She had worked in law firms for 2 decades, and she knew when a trial was rigged before it even started. Judge Grayson exhaled. Let's make this quick. I've got a golf game at 2. More laughter from the courtroom. Jalen glanced at his public defender, a nervous woman who looked like she had already accepted defeat. That's when Jalen made his move. Your Honor, he said, standing, I'd like to represent myself. A hush fell over the room. Judge Grayson raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? I said, I'd like to represent myself, Jalen repeated, his voice steady. Grayson leaned back, intrigued. All right, kid, let's see what you got. The prosecutor smirked. This should be good. Cracks in the case. Jalen turned to face the courtroom, his stance shifting from defendant to lawyer. Mr. Carrington, he said, you claim Officer Ruiz saw me in the stolen car? That's correct, Carrington replied, crossing his arms. Then I move to dismiss his testimony, Jalen said, his voice calm but firm. The room stirred. On what grounds? Judge Grayson asked, his amusement starting to fade. Jalen took a slow step forward. Because Officer Ruiz wasn't even on duty when the chase began. The prosecutor's smile disappeared. What? Jalen nodded. If we pull the officer's GPS logs, we'll see that he wasn't anywhere near the scene. So either he has superpowers or... He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Or he's lying, Judge Grayson finished for him. Murmurs erupted through the gallery. The judge turned to the prosecutor. Mr. Carrington, do you object to verifying the officer's GPS records? Carrington hesitated. Just for a second, but that was enough. The dominoes fall. Jalen didn't stop there. You also claim my fingerprints prove I stole the car, he continued. But tell me, if you walk into a store and try on a jacket, then put it back, does that mean you stole it if someone else takes it later? A few jurors exchanged glances. The car in question was parked outside a 7-Eleven hours before the alleged theft, Jalen said. I was there with friends. I leaned on it. I even opened the door because it was already unlocked, but I didn't steal it. He turned to the judge. And yet there's no forensic analyst here today to confirm how my fingerprints were found. No chance for me to cross-examine their methods. That seems convenient, doesn't it? Judge Grayson narrowed his eyes. The prosecutor shuffled his papers, but Jalen wasn't done. The truth comes out. Your Honor, I have one last piece of evidence, Jalen said, lifting a document, a statement from the vehicle's owner, Raymond Whitaker. Carrington's face went pale. Jalen read aloud. I left my car running when I went inside the gas station. Some kid must have jumped in and taken off, but it wasn't the guy you arrested. I saw the kid. He was white. The courtroom gasped. Jalen turned back to the judge. This was in the original police report. It was ignored. And yet the prosecution wants the jury to believe I was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Silence. Judge Grayson tapped his fingers on the desk, staring at Jalen. He inhaled deeply, then exhaled. Case dismissed. A collective exhale rippled through the courtroom. Jalen finally let out a breath of his own. A system exposed. As Jalen walked toward the exit, Judge Grayson called after him. "Mr. Dawson." Jalen stopped but didn't turn. Grayson hesitated, then said, "You should consider law school." Jalen smirked. "I already have." Outside, the courthouse steps were swarmed with reporters, microphones and cameras shoved toward him. How did it feel to beat a seasoned prosecutor? What are you going to do next? Did you ever think you'd win? Jalen ignored them all. At the bottom of the steps, his mother was waiting, arms crossed, face unreadable. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then finally, she shook her head, let out a breath and said, "Boy, you scared me half to death." Jalen chuckled. "Had to take a risk, Ma." She pulled him into a hug. The lesson. How many people had been convicted not because of evidence, but because of bias? How many had been railroaded by a system that cared more about closing cases than finding the truth? Jalen had knowledge. He had a fighting chance. But what about the ones who didn't? If this story makes you think, share it. Because next time it might not be Jalen. It might be someone you know.